Hey guys, Tommy Kerrigan with Tommy Untamed. We've got a great show coming up. Thank you for watching. What's up, guys? Thank you for watching Tommy Untamed. We're going to take a quick break and give a shout out to the sponsors who support the show and make it possible. The world's smartest investors are not buying oil stocks, they're buying mailbox money or oil royalties instead. I'm talking about passive income that shows up month after month, starting with as little as $25. Visit KerriganOilBoom.com to discover how to tap into monthly royalty checks from America's most productive oil basin. You don't need to be wealthy or connected, you just need a regular brokerage account. That's KerriganOilBoom.com to learn how you could start collecting oil royalty checks every month. Heaven's Harvest Prepper Food, 72 servings per pail, 25 years shelf life. I've had the owner Clayton on the show before. He's a God fearing, America loving patriot. Get one of these, get a couple of them, throw them in your basement. It's good to have it, not need it, than to need it and not have it. If you don't want to do that, you can get their seeds. You can plant your own garden. So you don't even have to keep buying them. You can just get the goods and start your own. Or you can even get freeze dried fruits and vegetables like bananas, apples, strawberries, and raspberries. They support the show. It's an honest product. It's a good safety measure to have. And they keep my show free for you. So I'd implore you guys to please go to heavensharvest.com, use the link in the description, promo code TPC. Axios Fitness Coaching is a premium resource for holistic strength and conditioning services. Axios is best known for the Training Club, capital T, capital C, an exclusive community that prioritizes accountability, technique, diet, and nutrition. Everything you need to do to take action against the decay of the modern world. Whether you're looking to improve your physique, build strength, or just take care of your health and fitness, Axios will provide you with the solution that is effective and simple to execute. All you need to do is complete the intake survey, and you can see if you're a good candidate for the training club or any other of the services. And it's going to sponsor the show. So, one company falls off, another one arises. So, if you guys like the show, you want to work out, throw the show a couple shekels, go take the survey. Thank you so much, guys.
Higher ultraviolet exposure is associated with lower mortality. The United Kingdom is a high latitude and low sunlight country. Researchers there collected data on over 360,000 participants in a study of UV exposure via solarium use. When compared with non-users, solarium users had 15% risk lowered of all-cause mortality, 23% lower risk of cardiovascular mortality, 14% lower risk of cancer mortality, and a 12% lower risk of non-cardiovascular, non-cancer mortality. In other words, all other causes. Quoting the researchers, our study adds to the growing evidence that the benefits of UV exposure outweigh the risks in low sunlight environments. A link to the original publication is available in the box below the video. Get some UV light this winter. Immerse yourself in the tranquility of the blue. Visit a Blue Room soon. www.blueroom.com.
Guys, thank you so much for watching Tommy Untamed. We got a great show today with Miss Cheryl Chumley on Tuesday, March 25th, 2025 at 2:03 p.m. Eastern Time. Your book and the link to it is in the description, God Given or Bust, which really is, I would say, kind of the question of today right now is the derivation of rights. It's, in theory, as somebody who grew up going to private Catholic school and then went through my edgy atheist phase and found my way back to Christ, is in theory, you could argue, like, no, we don't need the concept of God to be good people. Sure, fair enough. In the same way, we don't need to lock our doors, right? But I lock my door and I have a gun. I think most people in my apartment complex are good. I'd rather not find out in a scenario not of my choosing. So, but in my humble 34-year-old opinion, I kind of don't believe that holds up anymore. We're seeing, I mean, how quickly did we slide to take your toddlers, take the boys, put them on estrogen, take them to a strip club, and call it stunning and brave? It's very quickly. I'd say in under 10 years, we saw, like, yeah, no, that argument doesn't hold up. But, Ms. Chumley, could you please introduce yourself?
Sure. First off, thanks for having me. It's great to be with you.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
Currently, I'm online opinion editor and host of Bold and Blunt podcast at the Washington Times, and I have several books written. The most recent nonfiction one, as you said, God Given or Bust, Defeating Marxism and Saving America with Biblical Truths. And I like how you introduced that because you come to this awakening with eyes opened, right? Basically, taking a look at the landscape in America and seeing that what's been working in the last few years isn't really working for us, and that's exactly why I wrote God Given or Bust, because at this time in history, we are really facing the choice in America: do we either have God given individual liberties and rights? Or do we have government granted? Because you can't have both. The two are constantly at war with each other. And it's time to recognize the fact that in America, we have to be involved in the politics and the culture. But the ultimate source of freedom in America is God. And we have to keep that in mind, no matter who holds the positions of authority in political offices.
Yeah, it's yeah, the most simple, I guess, boiling down would be God given or state given. And when it's state given, it always just it'd be hilarious if it wasn't so pure evil, but it just kind of always results in genocide. No matter what country, no matter what continent, it always just kind of results in everyone against the wall dead, like every single time. And to put it in a higher power, I mean, I get the counter arguments. Again, someone that went to Catholic school, spent the formative years of my life, 2016 in Georgia, went to college in Valdosta, Georgia. Like I totally get, and I have to be, I totally get people that can be turned off by it. It's not appealing when you're walking to class and somebody's screaming at you saying you're gonna burn in hell for wearing flip flops. Like I do get that, and but on the other side, to put it in the power of the state is to put it in the power of humans who are corruptible. And I just, it is in front of us. It is working in front of, again, it's the idea of a perfect product. And then you put it out there and you're like, yeah, man, it hasn't made any sales. It's like, well, McDonald's sucks. That may be the case, but man, they're raking it in daily for whatever. You don't have to like it, but people are buying the quarter pounder. At a certain point, you do have to look at it and ask yourself how it's been put into practice. Is it working? Is the diet working? Is the, whatever you're doing working? And if it's not, you have to be very just honest and humble about it and go, does this look like it's working? And we use Occam's razor and be like, what is it that's happening right now? You can't use the argument that they're Jesus freaks or Bible thumpers. Like, no, man, there's something deeply wrong about bringing children to drag shows with naked men dancing in the street, shaking their genitals around. Like, you have to be honest with yourself. Whether we're talking about God or Santa Claus, you do have to be very honest and go, that's not working. This is not good. But, I don't know. Sorry, I was just rambling there.
Well, you hit the nail on the head with what most people's knee-jerk reaction is to the phrase God-given rights and liberties, right? It's the idea of politicians waving the Bible around and condemning those outside the Christian faith. That's not what it is, and that's not what I meant by God-given rights
Mm-hmm.
and liberties. All I meant is what founding fathers actually gave us. All you have to do is read the Declaration of Independence and realize that they intended our government to be one where individuals take their rights from a creator, right? So you can call those God-given rights, as I do, or you can call them inherent rights,
Mm-hmm.
birth rights, natural rights. But you can be an atheist, as I once was, and still benefit from the freedoms that we get in this country based on rights coming from a creator.
Absolutely, yeah. And just for the record, I wasn't projecting that on you, saying that's what you were
Mhm.
saying. But it's yeah, no. I mean, again, it's like I get the turned off knee jerk reaction, but it's deeper to that. You're right. You fine. Don't call him God. Call him natural. You're natural, right? The natural laws. Call him universe given. Call him whatever. Choose your pagan god. The idea is that it doesn't matter how many people, doesn't matter if 99 out of 100 people get together and say, we all hate Tommy, he's a slave and he doesn't deserve it. Like, no, there is this understanding that it is grander than you. It is grander than any government, be it an ancient Assyrian council or present day Congress, that there is something larger than humans. And it doesn't matter who writes it down or what argument they give, there is a right to liberty, to being a free person. You're not guaranteed anything, but no one is subhuman. No one is cattle. No one is a lesser than that is not granted the same rights as you and I. And I think you have to have that, and to say it is bigger than any of this, because once you defer it up to a level of humans, I don't know who said it, but there's some quote is, eventually your human heroes, you'll see their clay feet, right? It's you. Eventually you see the flaws in your mom and dad, even if they're minor. Oh, they're not the end all be all. You eventually get older and you look. I remember when my English teacher in high school turned 30, and I was like, man, she's so old. I'm 34, and I'm like, oh wow, yeah, no, you didn't have all the answers. You were just as scared as everyday life as the rest of us. To defer it to something grander than humans, I think, makes its potential grander than humans. If we defer it to people, that kind of puts a glass ceiling on it. It can only be as good as this person.
Well, there's a principle in the Bible that states that the heart is deceptively wicked. And basically, it just means that humans will do things in their own minds and hearts that are good, but are actually evil. And you can see that. Just go back under the coronavirus years, right? When everybody was trying to force people to obey certain government narrated, government mandated behaviors. And those who didn't want to do the government narratives, the government mandates, were called dangers to society. So we had like Americans just telling people, wear a face mask, get this shot, get this second shot, get this third shot, and so forth. Stay home and don't go about your business. Don't go to school, work, travel, church even. And that was all done out of so-called good. And if you look at America, though, we're based on a concept of individualism where we all individually decide our own pursuits of life, liberty, and happiness. And with that comes the awareness and the self-determination to choose your own medical treatments. And so COVID just completely flipped that. And one of the undercurrent themes of it was that people were trying to do good for others. And so if you don't take your morals and virtues from a higher source, from God, then what happens is they become subjected to whatever's going on in the political climate.
Yeah, no, that's a perfect example, because you did have demons from hell in COVID. People that knew what they were doing and they were making a ton of money off it. They're gonna burn in the center circle of hell. That they're done for. There are people that legitimately thought they were doing the right thing, and I have to feel for that, because in the same way, you can't. It really helps when it's somebody that you know and love. It really helps when it's a cousin or an old high school friend, and you're like, I know that dude. I was at that dude's wedding. Yeah, I knew that dude when we both had braces. I remember when we first both got drunk. I remember in college and all this stuff. I know that's a good person, and they feel so deeply about this that I know it's coming from a good place. I think it's objectively wrong, but I know that that's not somebody, rubbing their hands and going, "Oh, I'm making money on Pfizer stock." That's a good person doing what they think is the right thing, right? I mean, it's like helicopter parents. I doubt helicopter parents are trying to ruin their kids' lives. Some probably are, but most of them are. They just don't want any bad to come to them. And I've known in my own life, even just in the life of this podcast, which is a little over 5 years, whenever I can feel my thought process drifting to it's for the greater good, it only ever conveniently comes up when I can't win an argument or a battle with the tools that have been given. Well, my person didn't win the election. Well, listen, it's for the greater good. They need to just throw out the last president and put Trump. Like, whenever I find myself going to that, I always, because it's appealing. It's you can just abandon rationality. You go, we're losing the basketball game, whatever. I'm just gonna take the ball and go home. It appeals. It's a quick, screw it, I win. I've never, I've never had that thought, and at some point in the future, not look back at it and go, that would have ended in the worst possible thing. Like it's a flat. It pulls you in. It's for the greater. It's the road to hell is paved with good intentions. No, it's for the right thing, man. We just need the National Guard to go kick down every door and give everyone the vaccine. You look back at it and you're like, that would have killed so many people. And I don't think it's a false. It's a mirage. It's an evil mirage.
Yeah, and it is a temptation, especially when you have one side of the political aisle that is bringing this nation down a path of tyranny and dictatorial governance, and then the other side of the political aisle that is still trying at least to uphold some of the individual freedoms that the Constitution still supposedly guarantees us. And you see these course corrections that go on in government. We had Barack Obama, who was the pen and cell phone president, right? He didn't
Mm-hmm.
need Congress. He just issued executive order after executive order. Then Trump comes in and using executive orders reverses a lot of that. Then Joe Biden comes in using executive orders, reverses a lot of Trump. And here we are with Trump again, using the executive orders to reverse and undo the unconstitutional executive orders of Joe Biden years. But the problem with that is you're caught in this cycle of, every few years you get a course correction, a quick course correction, but you're not going for the principle. And in America, executive orders aren't really supposed to be used to issue dictates on the American people. They're very limited in scope on what they're rightly supposed to be used. But too frequently now we have presidents, beginning with Barack Obama, really, who have just taken their executive orders and run them roughshod over the American people to push agendas that they know they couldn't get passed in Congress. So when you're talking about good intentions being the road to hell, very frequently that's what happens in politics. You have like the good guys winning and you want them do it, do it, do it. You're on the right path. But at the same time, they're still not hitting at the principle. They're still not upholding the basic freedoms in America. And that's a problem.
Yeah, it is kind of like it's like trying to correct a car, and it's wobbling back and forth. Each each correction is more and more violent, and it normally ends with the car flipping or hitting a tree or something. Do you think that's what we're looking at? To be cynical, but just to be entertain ideas. Is that what we're looking at? Because and it's not all doom and gloom. Because I mean, in any like defensive driving class, they show you they stop overcorrecting, and it's hard because your gut's saying I gotta overcorrect, but the reality is the less you overcorrect, the less you're gonna swing back to the other side. But there's a second or two delay before you start appearing straight. So it's pulling your parachute, but it's like you don't freak out if it takes a second or two to slow down because there's a delay. If we keep doing these course corrections, I mean, it is a car going farther and left, right, left. It's going to flip. The only way to avoid that is to slow down the course corrections, which no one wants to do because it's my guy's in power. He's got to undo everything the last guy did. Is that what we're looking at? But instead of it happening over the course of milliseconds in a car, it's because it's a country, it's an empire. It happens in 4 year increments.
I think that's a good analogy, but I would also put a little bit more optimistic spin on it because what we're actually looking at for the solution there is for citizens in America to recapture that notion of God-given individual liberties and rights. Because when you have an individual who knows that they don't need government for this, and government doesn't rightly have an authority to enter into this particular area of life, you have citizens who are bold and they know their rights come from above. And so politicians are afraid to rock that boat, right? They probably tread a little more lightly when it comes to seizing individual liberties, because the uprising from the citizenry would be all the much more concentrated and determined. So it's basically, if you know where your rights come from, then when government comes knocking to steal your rights, you don't mind giving the middle finger, because you're secure in where your rights come from. So, look at that happening across the nation. If we had a nation of people who understood where their rights and liberties come from, COVID never would have gotten as out of hand with the government seizing individual liberties as it did. And that's what we need going forward. Under Trump, I think we have 4 years now with Trump in office. He's got some good people there. We have time to do the course correction that we need, but then we also have time as a nation of individuals to start doing things like getting back to church, reading the Constitution, and understanding founding fathers did not want to separate God from government, not in the way that the left wants it sold, and start insisting on their politicians, no matter what political party they are from, to recognize the limited scope of the Constitution and stop infringing on individual liberties.
Do you think it can go that way? I mean, I'm optimistic, and I do think it can.
I do, because you look back through great moments in history, and it doesn't start with 51%, right? It's not, you don't need a majority to change a nation, to change people's hearts and minds. It can start with just a few select individuals just being bold and determined on that message. And once people start hearing messages that resonate, they themselves get emboldened by it, because they're at home and they're thinking, that's what I think too. And they start realizing they're not alone. So that's how change sweeps through a nation. It just starts with one.
I also think that something like COVID, sure, it doesn't happen if people would have, a respect and I don't know, a reverence for not only the Constitution, but for the power in God. The only way to really jumpstart that again is probably something like COVID, which it's a risky gambit. It's the only way to really beef up security is like if there's a fail to break it. Like you don't, it's you got to have a missile shot at Air Force One before they're like, yeah, we should probably put some, anti-IR flares in it or something. You, I do think you need, which is a sucky thing about the human condition, but I suppose if it's not right in front of us, most of us don't care. But you need that Sputnik moment in order to, I don't know, jumpstart an immune response. Do you think you need something like COVID, or you need something like the last 4 years for it? Because otherwise, everything we're saying is like, it's a good discussion, but it kind of die. It's like, all right, well, that was a good lunch, and then it kind of dies. Versus when it's in your face, when it's like the FBI going to home and school meetings, when it's in your face, you kind of have to address it. And I do think that we wouldn't be seeing the change that we're seeing right now if we hadn't seen it go so far south in the last 4 years.
I have to agree with you on that. Particularly, the example that comes to mind is parents and the education system, because for so many years the education system has just been filling students' mind with socialist rot, and mostly unaware to parents. And then COVID locked everybody down, and suddenly parents saw what their kids were being taught in school, and not just the far leftist agenda, not just socialist type, anti-capitalist, anti-founding fathers agendas, but the transgender, the LGBTQ agenda. And it really outraged parents around the nation, and they banded together first in small groups, but it just swept across the nation. And now we have schools being put on notice everywhere. And more than that, we have actual conservatives and Christians and people with just limited government ideals running for school boards to boot out the socialists and communists who really had sat on those boards for a very long time. So yes, I get your logic. And I do think that sometimes, until you face the fire, until you're actually tested, then really things just sort of drift along as they are. And I think that's why we saw Donald Trump basically in his first term, why there were so many people outraged with him because he was the great disruptor, right? He showed many things that had been quietly under the surface taking place for so long, and he came in and disrupted it. So I get your point, and I do agree with that certain in your face type of need.
What can he then? Not that you have the it's the $1 zillion question, but what can he then do to stop the oncoming tide of Marxism that really went into high gear the last 4 years, but also not become the very thing we're just talking about that's a negative, ruling with the executive order. How do you thread that needle?
Right. Well, I've taken some optimism from Donald Trump in many of his speeches where he talks specifically about our nation is great because of God and we have God given individual liberties. And, he keeps talking about that notion, which is different from what a lot of Democrat politicians have been saying in recent times. So, really, narrative is very important because when you start putting ideas out there in the public, and they start discussing them or mulling them over, and then they dig a little deeper and they realize, hey, that's the foundation of America, God-given individual liberties and rights. That's American exceptionalism. I think people start to embrace those as norms, and then once they do that, they start to insist on their political classes adhering to those norms. And I think Donald Trump's doing a great thing with fighting, fighting, fighting on so many fronts. The border is huge. The LGBTQ agenda is huge. Foreign policy is huge, pushing back the globalists that really had steamrolled into America in the last few years. And in the meanwhile, he's just putting the narrative out there about individual rights and freedoms in America. So he's on the right path for that.
This is more of like an abstract, not again, not that you have the answer. Not that it's really related to what we're talking about, but one thing I've been trying to struggle with lately is like you know, as an adult, I do understand now, the importance of in the eyes of God, if we can peer into God's head, of free will. Well, how come we're not all just in the Garden of Eden? Well, because then there's really nothing to that. You're a marionette. There's no it's not a surprise if I bake myself a cake, put it in the kitchen, walk outside, and then walk back. What's the point? You can have the cake if you want, but that's not the value. The value is in human relationships and things that transcend money and material. So I do understand the importance of free will in if a God beyond time, but if there was time, it'd be eternal. Yeah, he can run the Earth simulation 100 trillion times with marionettes that sing his praise. Like there's no whatever. It's boring. It's a movie you've seen. The power of free will is, you know, one. That's an actual novel experience. It's a life worth living. If you don't have free will, you're not really living. You're just in a roller coaster experiencing. But if you have free will, you can interact and interface with this world, and it makes loving God and it makes acts of love and acts of empathy and selflessness have actual value. It's when you go and donate to a charity, that's different than when it's taken out of your bank by the IRS and you're threatened with jail time or armed agents. There's a little more oomph to it when, you're like, I'm going to bring some ramen noodle to the homeless shelter. It means something. So I understand, if I can, I understand why God gives us free will. Okay. And then I understand, well, the opposite. If God exists and his angels exist, well, then Satan and demons exist. Pure evil. Evil for evil's sake, not just for making money, but people that really do want to corrupt innocence. Okay, got it. Demonic possession or evil influence is a thing. God can't step around free will. You'd have to ask God to come into your life. At what point can God? Because I look at something like last summer, the bullet missing Trump's head, and I go, that was. I know atheists that say that's divine intervention. What in God's no pun? What in God's name was that? I know atheists are going, what the hell is that? I mean, I've had on former Secret Service guy, Delta Force guys who are like, that doesn't. I don't know what the that was. Excuse me, but like, where does God's intervention then play a role? At what point, if we can measure it, is there a threshold? Is there a flow chart? At what point does God intervene? Where you go, God, do you have to ask God to help? Does because he wouldn't just intervene in his free will experiment, because that would kind of void the free will experiment. Not that you have the answer to that, because that's like where did we, that's up there with like what is the meaning of life and where did the universe come from?
So yes, you're right. That's a deep question, and of course, I don't have the answers, but I do know what the Bible says that God numbers the hairs on your head, right? So that tells me that He cares enough about you that He knows the number of each and every hair on your head. And I also know that God can do what He wants. He can intervene based on prayer, which I think is more a gift to the person because God already knows past, present, and future. He already knows what He's going to do. But if He allows you to pray and ask specifically for a request, and then He responds to that specific request, that gives your heart joy, right? That gives you like, God's really listening to me. And I also know that He can intervene, without requests. He does what He wants. And, insofar as how that plays into America's political system and America's governing system. If you go back in time to the founding of America, so much of where founding fathers turned to get the wisdom of the limits on government in America, they used the Judeo-Christian principles. They used the Judeo-Christian Bibles and texts, and they based their ideas of freedom on that. And so, if you look at America, which is different and distinct from every other nation in the world, it's for that reason that our government is inextricably intertwined with God and godly principles. And you can't remove God from American society and still maintain God given individual liberties, right? You can't have God given if you take out God. And so, insofar as answering a question, when does God intervene? When He wants, right? But I think that He, every day, every second, every millisecond, is in the minds and hearts of His believers. He knows what we're going to say, what we're going to do, and it's all because of His sovereign control.
Yeah, again, not that you have the answer to that. It's just been something I've been kind of diving into mentally, at least lately. I'm like, where does God? It might just be that might be that is the free will. It's the free will to ask God to come in, and then He can come in, and versus it seems like evil is something that seems to try to pry itself in. Um, and again, not that you have the answer to this, but one thing I've also kind of found in whatever limited experience I have with praying or God, or if we can even talk about that objectively, is I've often found the prayers that get answered are ones where I focus more on the end point as opposed to the mechanism in which I reached the end point. And like punching an address into your GPS. Like, well, why is it taking me this way? It's like, well, you don't know where you're going. That's why you put it in the GPS. So you kind of have to have some humility and be like, why is it taking me around town? You can't really talk. You don't know where you're going. So you now have to follow the GPS and turn left here, turn right there. And all the while, if it seems obnoxious or seems stupid, it's like, you're the idiot that didn't know where to go. If you knew where to go, you wouldn't be using the GPS. So shut up. And so, all right, it's like going to the ER and telling the doc, no, well, I'm not sure. It's like, hey, dude, you drove to the hospital. So, you've forfeited a certain level of awareness of what's going on. And so I found less of, if I ask for like, more subscribers on my podcast, or I've do a bigger paycheck, but instead it's something deeper, like I wish, I'd show me the way to, move so I'm closer to my brothers and parents, and, how to place value more on seeing my family than, say, a big screen TV. And when I ask for those things that are pure, I'm like, let me be. In 2014, I lost my older brother to suicide. So if I'm like, show me a way to help prevent others from taking their lives, it's less of a magic wand, and instead it's like, oh, here's a podcast with a platform, and you can grow it, and then you can get in touch with people that do suicide prevention, or vets that run. I've had on vets that run, military vets, places to go for other vets where it's because I'm not a veteran. I would imagine it's hard to take advice from someone who hasn't seen combat. When I look at that, or if I go, yeah, I want to see my family more. How do I be a better brother, a better son? Then it will kind of like the GPS taking me in a new direction. The show will grow in a certain percentage. My income will go up a certain percentage. And next thing you know, I'm like, hey, I can afford to actually move back up to New England. When I look at those more abstract and pure endpoints, not that I want a Ferrari or I want this, but instead, how do I do this, or show me the way to do this? Then the ground comes up to meet me, and it forms a bridge where there was none. And I think that's the best, very vague gray understanding I have of prayer or intention. Is like I can't ask God to be taller. That's not it. I can't ask God for the lottery. That's not how it works. It's something more abstract, and then you'd have to then scale that up to go. Well, if 300 million people are praying for a better country and they don't like the way it's going, God's GPS might take you in a way that at first seems stupid. You go, how in God's name are we getting this with Biden in office and they're raiding home and school meetings? In what world is this the answer to prayers? I would look at it now and go, yeah, no, that's probably an answer to prayers. We wouldn't be where we are now. The Overton window wouldn't have been shifted had we not had the last 4 years. So I don't know if there's really a question in there. More so, I'm just thinking aloud. But yeah, I don't know.
So, yeah, sometimes God will allow the worst thing imaginable to
Yeah.
happen, right? So you can see how badly you need his prayer, which, Joe Biden was about the worst thing imaginable to happen in the White House. And, it's interesting about your prayers because I found moving from an atheist up until my 30s, basically agnostic, and finally becoming a Christian, I found over the years that the most effective prayers for myself are when I ask God specifically to bring my will, my desires, my heart into accordance with his will for my life. And in that way, it's really a show of
Oh.
faith because it's saying, God, you know that I want this and this and this and this, right? But maybe that's not what you want for me. So I'm going to put it all on you and just say, put in my mind the desires you want me to have for my life. And then
Oh.
that seems the basis of growth, at least for myself, growth and progression and many things that, the material things that you want to ask for when you're very immature, right, as a Christian, but then you start to feel wrong asking for them or it doesn't work out how you want. So to me, that's been the most effective prayer. That and praying for other people as well.
I really like that. Yeah, you know, it's like if you're stuck at the airport, it's like stop praying for your plane to be here and be like, can you just make me enjoy the airport? And it's
Yeah,
like, yeah,
maybe
all
he
right.
wants to be delayed for a reason. Maybe
Yeah.
there's somebody there, or maybe he's saving you from a plane crash. You don't know.
Yeah.
So,
Or you meet someone
what's-
at the airport or something and it's
yes,
like, I really like that. That's even
yeah, you can
yeah.
use it for
Yeah.
traffic,
Yeah.
everything
I'd,
in your
I'd
career.
yeah, I'd rather have a sore throat. Make me enjoy strep throat. Man, I really cuz I'm always trying to like go farther and farther up the flow chart of progression. And I'm like, how do I just like cut out the middleman and go higher and higher up? And it's yeah, it's like no, don't pray for money in a bigger podcast. Pray just be closer to your family, and whatever way it takes me there, let's go. And that's yeah, but I like that even more.
Mhm.
Is just God align my intentions.
It's
You're
total
right.
faith
It is,
because
but it and it's also not him interjecting in your free will. It's you saying, "Hey, I know I want the Lamborghini. I want you to make me want what you want." Because that's free will, right? That would still be in
yes.
accordance with free will, as opposed to
Yeah.
God just interfering in. Because without that, then there comes back to the whole negates the free will. The last thing you said though, you have that and praying for other people. Could you go into that?
So, it as a human, right? It's very easy to get in this cycle of me, 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 right? Like, I want this. I'm working so hard. God, why won't you reward this or whatever? But look, there's always somebody out there that, they would look at your life as
Mhm.
being total perfect dream life. And I find when I pray for other people, it softens my heart and it makes me humble and it makes me more grateful. And I think in turn, God can work through my life easier when I have a heart like that. And at the same time, praying for other people is what God wants you to do anyhow. And
Mm.
so I like hearing people I've prayed for, they come back at some point in life and say, hey, this happened for me. All of a sudden I just got this out of the blue. And it makes me think that God hears those prayers and helps other people that way too. So I don't think you can ever go wrong praying for other people.
Yeah, it is a humbling act to put others before and be like, yeah, I want. It also kind of makes you put your stuff, makes you give a more sober examination of your own life. If you're praying
Yes,
for somebody to, whatever, to stop drinking or stop whatever doing coke or gambling, or and you go, well, how come you're not praying for that for yourself? And you're like, well, I don't have those issues, and it's like, well, that there's a win. It's like, say that back to yourself. Oh, I don't have those issues. I'm not hooked on a substance. I don't gamble. I'm as good as I can be financially. It's like, take the praying for someone and be like, man, I hope he gets his air conditioner back. Well, that means you have your air conditioner. Well, yeah. Well, that's pretty cool. Like, that's sometimes I do that, Rob. If I'm just having like a meh day, I'll be like, it's cool. Like, my internet works. Is there anything more rage inducing than when the Wi-Fi keeps disconnecting and you're like, you just want to throw your phone through the window? You're like, well, what have I done to deserve this? And sometimes I'm just like, hey, like, my internet's working. My refrigerator works. The hot water works. My sink isn't clogged. Those are all you're kind of like, yeah, hey, that's something. Like, do you ever have strep throat? And like, I remember when I was young, I got my tonsils up, but my strep throat used to be so bad. I remember I was in like sixth grade. I would start thinking about like from like God or Jesus in like Gethsemane. I'd be like, my God, why have you forsaken me? Like, I would be like laying down on like my bed, like my throat's full, and I'd be like, God, why have you forsaken? And I look back at it and I'm like, you're a fucking piece of work. But like, there is something to that. When praying for others, it's normally by the human things to pray for yourself. So if you're praying for someone else for an issue, that probably means that yours is going pretty well.
right, right.
I
It,
like
it
that.
takes you outside yourself and it makes you grateful for what
Yeah,
you have.
yeah,
So,
and that isn't kind of injection of gratefulness. And I gotta let you run, so we'll wrap it up. But another one is I think about it's just some meme. I don't even remember where it's from, or if it's a quote or whatever. But it's like, oh, I made it like, oh, foolish me. I caught myself rushing through the life that I had once prayed for. And I do that a lot. I mean, when I started this show, it was I was living with my parents, working at a liquor store for minimum wage. Whenever I find myself just working, I'm like, can I just take a moment and pause? Like, the podcast pays for my apartment. Like, I'm healthy. I have, you know, a Rolodex of people. I have fun with it. Like, I find myself rushing through what I once just I once prayed so hard just to be able to quit the liquor store job, regardless of anything else. And everything is so great now, and I find myself still just zipping through it onto the next thing. So yeah, I almost foolish me. I almost rushed through what I once prayed for. So I think that's a
right.
good one too. Um, but Miss Chumley, we'll wrap this up. Thank you so much for thank you for as always, thank you for surviving an episode with me where I just ramble on like an idiot for an hour. So I
It
appreciate
was
that.
nice chatting with you. Thank you
Yes,
for your
ma'am.
thoughts.
You as well. Thank you so
You
much
have a
for coming on here. Guys, please go in the description. Please go find the link to our book. I will email this to you. And I'd love to have you back on sometime.
sure.
Yes,
Love
ma'am.
to.
Thank you so much.